CBC News.
Tonight, mean streets. Serbia's protests turn violent. Christmas in Peru. Not much to celebrate. And what's going on? Canada's wacky holiday weather.
And on our magazine, try to peer into the future, into the new millennium, 40 years from now.
Gee, you know, what you thought was your profession? It's changed. What you thought was the workplace? It's changed. What you thought was a family? That's changed. What you thought was a community? That's completely different now.
How we live, what we'll know. The National Maclean's Millennium Poll. Tonight, Canada in the year 2035.
The National, with Hannah Gartner and Paul Hunter.
Good evening. More than 4 weeks of peaceful protests in Belgrade came to a violent and bloody end today. The Serbian capital was the scene of running street battles between pro and anti-government supporters. And when riot police moved in, the violence escalated. The trouble started when supporters of Socialist President Slobodan Milosevic arrived for a rally and met face-to-face with anti-government protesters. Paul Wood reports from Belgrade.
Serbian riot police moved against the opposition protesters after the socialist demonstrators and President Milosevic had departed the scene. Police fired volleys of tear gas and waded in with batons drawn, inflicting severe beatings on a number of opposition supporters. In the most serious incident of a day of violence, a man was shot in the head. Eyewitnesses said the shots came from crowds of socialist supporters. There's no independent confirmation of the allegations. The first scuffles began early in the day as socialist and opposition crowds converged in the center of Belgrade. People began screaming abuse at each other. And at one point, opposition supporters attacked the socialists with sticks. The opposition say conflict was inevitable from the moment the socialists decided to hold their rally at the same time and in the same location as the now routine anti-government demonstrations. The situation now is tense, with lines of riot police facing the remaining opposition demonstrators. It's not clear if the socialist rally was a sign of panic or of confidence on the part of President Milosevic. But the Serbian leader is facing the most serious challenge of his 9-year rule, and the opposition say it's not over yet. For CBC News, this is Paul Wood in Belgrade.
A single hostage walked out of the Japanese ambassador's residence in Peru tonight. But as the crisis in Lima enters week 2, there are still more than 100 people being held. And as Keith Bogue reports, they're settling in for a Christmas in captivity.
On Christmas Eve in Lima, people rush around to do their last-minute shopping and get ready to celebrate, just as they do in so many cities around the world. But here, this Christmas Eve, many minds are on the hostages still held at the Japanese ambassador's house. I hope the rebels get the Christmas spirit and free the hostages, she says, so they can spend Christmas with their families. Some hope for a surprise gift.
I think maybe today or tonight are a surprise. I'm glad the people release tonight, no?
The hostages, the rebels, the police, the Red Cross workers, the reporters, they are all settling in for Christmas here, waiting to see what happens next. At the Red Cross headquarters, relatives of those held hostage dropped off written messages for them. The wife of the Malaysian ambassador was there.
I keep myself busy. I'm trying very hard to keep busy so I don't think of this thing. So I'm trying to be positive. So far I'm doing okay, I think.
The Red Cross collected and sorted messages from the hostages yesterday. Today, they are handling the replies.
In the course of the evening, the hostages can have news from their families, and I think this is a very important thing for them to have news and to feel relief, you know, to feel close to their families in a day like Christmas.
But they would not allow this nun to send a message in because she is not related to a hostage.
We are praying for all them and looking for the peace for everybody.
The Red Cross is preparing a special Christmas meal and delivering sacramental wine and wafers for a midnight mass in the embassy compound. Among the hostages is Juan Julio Wicht, a well-known priest in Lima who refused to leave with other hostages on Sunday night. He'll deliver the Mass. And at his own church in a poor section of Lima, his parishioners will say a special prayer for Father Wicht. The caretaker at his church says the hostages are lucky to have such a good man with them. In the early evening, there was a break. Another hostage released, this time the ambassador from Uruguay. Most significant, it seems, his freedom was given in exchange for the release of 2 prisoners in Uruguay, prisoners with ties to Peru's rebel Tupac Amaru. That would make it the first concession the rebels here have won. Japan's prime minister did nothing to raise spirits here. When it was reported, he said he feared the rebels were settling in for a long war of nerves. He said he didn't expect the standoff to end until sometime in the new year. Keith Bogue, CBC News, Lima.
At least 3 people are dead after a bomb explosion in a Protestant church near Frankfurt. The bomb went off while about 70 people were at a Christmas Eve service. Police say 10 people were seriously injured. There was a lot of anticipation in the Middle East today and some high expectations for a Christmas Eve breakthrough in the peace process. But as Anna Maria Tremonti reports, there's still no deal on Hebron, at least not yet.
The message from Islamic militants to the Palestinian leadership was blunt, as members of Hamas, the Islamic resistance movement, demonstrated their view of peace deals with Israel. Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat spent 3.5 hours negotiating with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Arafat almost stormed out twice, and each man left separately. But U.S. Special Envoy Dennis Ross reported real progress in talks he characterized as very, very good. In particular, he said the level of trust between the 2 men has improved.
But also, the tone of the meeting was extremely good, and it really embodied the commitment that both was making to each other to develop a relationship, a partnership, not only now, but in the future.
Israel has apparently decided to bend on several issues it had added to the previously negotiated agreement on the redeployment of troops from Hebron, the last Palestinian city under Israeli occupation. It is no longer demanding hot pursuit, the right to chase Palestinian suspects into Palestinian areas, and it has dropped its opposition to the opening of a main street, Shuhada, that runs close to the enclave of Jewish settlers in the center of Hebron. The Palestinians say there are still major issues of substance outstanding, including a timetable for the 3rd and final phase of peace negotiations. But Chief Palestinian negotiator Saab Erekat, noting a change in Israel's stand, is optimistic.
There was never an atmosphere of what we witnessed today throughout our last 10 weeks of negotiations.
Over the last 2 months, the relationship between Israel and the Palestinian Authority has deteriorated to the point where each side was musing about serious confrontation, war even. There may not have been a final agreement with this meeting, but the level of suspicion at least appears to have been reduced enough to get on with the final bargaining. Anna Maria Tremonti, CBC News, Jerusalem.
It's been a tragic Christmas Eve in South Africa. A bomb attack at a shopping mall northeast of Cape Town killed 3 people, 2 of them children. 3 pipe bombs exploded while the mall was crammed with last-minute Christmas shoppers. About 80 people were wounded. No one has claimed responsibility for the bombing, but police say they're looking for 3 suspects who fled the scene. The government of Rwanda is pushing ahead with plans to prosecute war criminals. The United Nations said today that more than 2,300 people have been arrested in the past 2 months, most of them Hutus, flooding back from refugee camps across the border. As Martin Simongo reports from Rwanda, 2 years after the genocide, the Hutus' return is creating a new kind of terror.
It is a silent procession past the church at Narabuye. These returning Hutus do not speak, for they are anxiously aware of the unspeakable, the slaughter of Tutsis inside the church. Within these sacred walls, Hutu extremists butchered the innocent. Wooden crosses mark their final resting place. Beside the church, a grisly monument to genocide. Their skeletons fill several rooms. They were left where they fell. Jeravajiza survived the massacre, the only one of a family of 7. She comes here because this is where her parents, her brothers and sisters died. It is all she has left, but it is difficult. She is haunted by memories. The terror of seeing her family killed, the pain when her fingers were cut off. She cannot talk about what happened. It is too much. And now Jarabajiza is haunted by the present. The Hutus are back, camped next to the church. Among them, she says, some of the killers. Their arrival has made the Tutsis uneasy.
The return will have an enormous impact on the Tutsis of Nerabuye. They will be forced to relive the horrors of genocide.
And yet, Hutus are afraid too. They are deep in the heart of Rwanda, surrounded by the Tutsi-dominated army, uncertain of the fate that awaits them. Some profess innocence, but fear the worst. I'm afraid someone will accuse me, he says. I'll be forced to defend myself to a judge. The government is intent on finding and punishing the guilty, but it's also determined to foster reconciliation between Tutsi and Hutu. Jarabajiza wants no part of it. She says the government can do what it likes. I will not forgive. She will look, but nothing will bring her close to the Hutus. It is a great, invisible divide, thick with fear, mistrust, and hatred. And across the country, there are many thousand Jaravajizas, many places like Nerabuye. Martin Seamungle, CBC News, in eastern Rwanda.
Still ahead in tonight's news, what's happening to the holiday weather? And later on our almanac, lighting up the streets, the spirit of Montreal. And on our magazine, the promise and the peril of the new millennium, a bright future beyond Earth.
Space tourism will be in place. I know that the Japanese are already planning hotels on the moon.
And a reality check on the information age.
Information and the increase of information and the hype about the internet, and I'm familiar with that, is not the same as knowledge and understanding.
Brace yourselves. Canada in the year 2035. Canadians are getting an early present from Canada Post tonight, door-to-door mail delivery on the night before Christmas. The corporation says it's adding the extra service because severe weather across the country has caused a backlog. In British Columbia, people are dashing through unseasonal snow. Elsewhere, it's breathtakingly cold. In fact, as Red Sharon reports, in most of Canada, the weather outside is frightful.
Never mind that there's already over 100 centimeters of snow on the ground and winter has only just officially started. Never mind that it's frozen so hard the streets are like cement wagon trails. This is Winnipeg and it's Christmas. People are used to it, right? Wrong.
Let's just say they're absolutely outrageous out here right now. You're just bouncing along.
One thing I forgot to mention is that on top of all this snow, more than the city normally gets in an entire year, it's also freezing. Minus 35 again last night. But if it's any consolation for Winnipeggers, it's the fact that looking across the country, they're not the only ones being nailed by wacky weather. Skiing on the hills around Quebec for the holidays? On some hills, forget it. How about a skate on the Rideau Canal? Go ahead, take the plunge. Out west in Vancouver, Santa will be slip-sliding his way through the city. Be careful what you dream for. This year, Vancouver will have its white Christmas.
Oh dear, this is not very pleasant.
At Environment Canada, where most of them feel like wearing a bag over their head, they say it may be warm in the east, but that too will change.
What's going on?
Well, it's just the way it's set up. We have a cold trough coming down. It's spread through BC, and it's back over to our area.
Maybe it's that full moon. Back in Winnipeg at the Katy residence, they call it the star shining in the east, twinkling with the 15,000 lights they've put up. Where cold or not, there's a steady pilgrimage, little bundles of scarves and mittens wandering past the gang of Frosties, challenging the toy soldiers in search of candy canes.
Here we are.
Arvin and Nancy Katy stand out here 6 hours a night.
It's cold, but
it brings up the warmth in people.
And although Jack Frost may be nipping at your nose, it's all right. Winnipeg is, after all, the Christmas capital of Canada, even at 35 below. Red Sharon, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Pope John Paul II led hundreds of millions of Catholics tonight in an ancient Christmas Eve tradition, the Midnight Mass at the Vatican. The Pope looked frail as he made his plea for peace and goodwill. There were more than 6,000 people on hand for the Mass. It was available to 500 million more on worldwide television. And in Calcutta today, a rare public appearance by Mother Teresa. Just 5 days after her release from hospital, she led prayers at an early Christmas Mass. And that's the news. Now, here's Hannah Gartner with our magazine.
Futurists thought they had it right 40 years ago.
One nurse at a central control panel will be able to manage a whole brigade of babies, and the tykes will spend happily antiseptic infancies untouched by human hands.
Today, some of those visions are part of our day-to-day lives.
In the next half-century, people will see as well as hear around the world. Newspapers, magazines, mail, and messages will be sent through the air at lightning speed and reproduced in the home.
While other visions are still far-fetched.
This charmer displays what might be the perfect casual outfit for catching the weekend rocket shuttle to visit friends in any of the outer space suburbs.
So what's in store for us in the next 40 years?
This is an atomic age problem they don't tell a girl about at secretarial school.
Hello. Canadian philosopher George Grant said, "Only fools predict the future." Well, call us foolish. As part of our National Maclean's poll, we asked Canadians to look towards the new millennium. Tonight, we look farther, to the year 2035. Why 2035? No reason, just that it seemed far enough away from today to have some fun. What will our lifestyles be like, our environment, the future of science, of faith? We have an evening full of interesting guests to lead us through the future. We begin with the year 2035 and your home, your neighborhood, where you live. Our guide is Grant McCracken, a social anthropologist at the Royal Ontario Museum.
Classically, with the approach of the end of century, there's always this feeling of trepidation because the rules do change. Certainly with the change of the millennium, that anxiety is even stronger. We know that the rules of the old order will be swept away. We can see them being swept away day to day, decade to decade. And it's really, just sort of bracing yourself for impact.
We don't seem to be able to figure out how to stop it.
Yeah.
Do you think we'll get smarter?
I think so. I mean, everyone now experiences almost on a daily basis, certainly on a monthly, a yearly basis, a new dynamism in their lives. Everyone is being told, gee, what you thought was your profession, it's changed. What you thought was the workplace, it's changed. What you thought was a family, that's changed. What you thought was a community, that's completely different now. Those changes course through our lives, and I think it makes us, we're called upon to be much more adaptive, and that's a very good thing.
What's your prediction? What kind of neighborhoods are we going to see in 2035?
I think they'll be more neighborly. I think the localities will be more local. We'll spend more time in them. If we get to spend the commuting dividend at home in our neighborhoods, we'll get to know our neighbors better. We'll spend more time around. And I think that's good for the sense of neighborhood.
What's going to happen to the cities, to the core of these cities are going to be emptied out when everybody's online? We're going to have a lot of ghost towns across this country?
Yeah, certainly urban cores presuppose that kind of physical concentration. And that will change. If business can be conducted at a distance, if we don't need to travel to the downtown core, we certainly won't. And the property values of the inner city, of the urban core, will change. Well, we already see in some Canadian cities, we see large, what used to be office buildings converted to condominiums. The urban core is always important. Those concentrations of people are important for things beyond the conducting of business. And those will continue. I mean, certainly live theater and things like that.
When you look at a house like this, that's healthy, environmentally friendly, cost efficient, is this going to be the house of the future?
We haven't yet heard the full pitch for things like this, the Healthy House, and it's a compelling pitch when you hear the details. And these are simple design decisions, and our sense of how we make places homey will still be active, and we'll still insist. I mean, I think that's only a 50s modernist idea of the future, you know, that everything will look like a laboratory.
So how is our environment, the home we live in, going to change?
I think it'll be wired for light and sound, and the light and sound will come from all over. I mean, if you think now what the internet can do for us, it's pretty awkward. But it certainly gives us we can carry on conversations with people in Shanghai. The computer we're contemplating for the year 2035 will allow us extraordinarily acute sort of visual record of our friend in Shanghai who shares our special passion for 19th century poetry. The visual signal will be so clear, so dense, so rich that it makes no difference that they are thousands of miles away.
This is an extraordinary concept. What is it going to mean if we are not going to have any real human contact with one another?
So I'm not saying that we will no longer interact with people in a bodily, physical, you're here, I'm here.
Well, you could have a virtual marriage with this person on a screen in Shanghai.
No, I don't think so. No, but I think...
And why not?
Well, I think...
I'm just taking what you're saying one step further. Why not?
No, I think we'll continue to have physical relationships, shared space relationships, if you will. But we won't, those won't be the only relationships we have. Half of the relationships we have in shared space are accidental ones, and
we're now
not very
having sexual relations on computers.
Well, they are indeed, absolutely. Sherry Turkle says that's so. And I don't want to comment it, but the quality of it doesn't sound very appealing. But who knows? Who knows? But I think, listen, if we're occupying our homes, if we're occupying our lives more densely, it seems to me our physical interaction with people is richer. And you add to that then the opportunities of interaction with people across the globe, and it feels like win-win.
The greatest hallmarks of an era are often in the world of science. Well, just look back over the past 50 years. We've broken the speed of sound and sent a man to the moon. So how will the world change by the year 2035? Will technology have changed everything around us so much that we won't even be able to recognize the world we live in? Hi, Bob.
Hi, Hannah. Like the effect?
Indeed. Bob McDonald has dropped in to help us with the questions.
Well, Hannah, the new millennium does promise to be a time of really explosive growth in science and technology, and that's very exciting. But at the same time, we face what some people say is the greatest crisis humanity's ever seen. I mean, we have a population that's growing faster than our ability to feed it, and we have a climate that's changing in ways we can't even predict. The big question is, can science get us through the emerging dangers and improve our lives in ways we can't imagine, or is civilization on the brink of collapse? The future of space is one area of science that holds much promise. In less than 50 years, we have learned to fly higher, faster, and further than the birds. We've reached beyond the moon, but the exploration of space has just begun. Canadian astronaut Dr. Bob Thirsk is one of a new breed of spacefarers who routinely live and work in orbit. He flew on the Space Shuttle Columbia in 1996. Dr. Thirsk, what do you see in the space program in the year 2035?
I think by 2035, we will have a small colony on the moon, mining the resources there, and also using it as a scientific outpost, particularly for radio astronomy. We will have a new, bigger and better space station in orbit around the Earth, which will have not only scientific purposes, but also a role to help support some of these interplanetary missions that will be going on at that time. Space tourism will be in place. I know that the Japanese are already planning hotels on the moon, and I hope that many Canadians will have the opportunity to see what I saw earlier this year. The Earth is just beautiful from orbit. And finally, I think we'll probably by then have the first or second human exploration mission to the planet Mars under our belt. So we'll be starting to be going out into the inner solar system and exploring.
So what's Canada's role in all of this?
Canada is a country which is not as large a spacefaring nation as, say, Russia or or the United States or even the European Space Agency. But what we have been able to do is very strategically choose niche areas where we are good and where we can make a contribution to the international community. And typically these niche areas have been remote sensing, communications, and also space robotics. So I think in the years to come, we'll probably continue to find niche areas, hopefully expand our program out and make even larger contributions to the international endeavors.
What do you think it's going to take to keep the dream of flying in space alive for another 50 years?
I think that we're going to have well-balanced space programs that include not only the robotic spacecraft, which go out initially and explore, but we also have to have the human element in the program as well, something that excites the young people in Canada and elsewhere in the world today to vision and to dream about flying in space and doing incredible things. If we can keep a nice balance between the robotic and the human elements in space flight, I don't think we have much concern for the next 50 years. It will happen.
Dr. Thirst, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Well, nowhere has science been more valuable to us than in medicine, and nothing holds more promise than the Human Genome Project. In the past 6 years, scientists have begun to unlock the secrets of DNA, the microscopic molecule found inside every living cell. It's sometimes called the blueprint of life. Scientists around the world are now trying to read that blueprint and identify the hundreds of thousands of genes that are in DNA that determine our characteristics. Dr. Eva Turley is a research scientist at the Hospital for Sick Children in Toronto. We know that in other areas of science, some specific events have meant a great deal. For example, the invention of the telescope revolutionized astronomy. How would you place the Human Genome Project in the history of medical science?
Well, it really is an important foundation. It would be the same thing in chemical terms. It would be the same thing as defining the periodic table of elements. That's exactly what is being done in the Human Genomic Project.
A periodic table for the human body.
Right.
Why is it so important?
Because you absolutely need to know the structure of structure of genes in order to understand what they do, in order to understand how disease happens.
Why is it taking so many people to identify something that's so small?
Well, the human genome contains, it varies depending on who you talk to, but between 100,000 to 300,000 genes. Each gene is composed of a coding sequence, and there are 3 billion of these sequences, and you've got to identify each and every single one of them. So technically, it's very difficult to do.
Now, we assume that by the year 2035, all of the genes will be identified. What will that mean to medical science?
What it means is that we'll have a blueprint. It doesn't mean that we'll know how diseases happen or how to cure them. If I can use the analogy, it's like having a list of all of the components of a TV, but that doesn't mean that we know how to build a TV or get a picture out of a TV yet. That is where the next big challenge will be, is to identify what each of these genes are doing and how they interact with one another to make a human being function, and what happens when that human being malfunctions, as in disease.
What about the ethical issues that'll arise from having all of the information on your DNA known?
Well, those are issues that are very important to consider. They're privacy issues, and there are also issues, societal issues as well. The privacy issues are you as a person would not necessarily want anybody else to know what your susceptibility to disease was, because that might make you less insurable or whatever. It might make people less willing to hire you, etc. So those are all issues that have to be concerned. And the Genome Project puts about 5% of its money into studying ethical consequences. They have a number of people from various disciplines studying what the consequences of this information will be.
Thank you, Dr. Turley.
You're welcome.
Well, the future gets really frightening when it comes to the environment. By the year 2035, the population will have doubled. Demands for food and water will increase, and the atmosphere will continue to warm and change its chemistry. The disappearance of wildlife will continue at a pace not seen since the extinction of the dinosaurs. Will humanity also be poised on the brink of extinction? David Runnels is a senior fellow at the International Institute for Sustainable Development. Mr. Runnels, how close to the edge are we?
If we don't do anything about it, we'll be very close to the edge. I don't think in many ways we're far away from the edge in a number of critical areas right now.
Can you give us some specific examples of real steps that we could take now that would make a difference?
Well, I think we've got to go back to some of the basics we learned 4 or 5 years ago with the Brundtland Commission report. We've got to find a way to produce economic growth, or at least produce a decent economic environment for most of the world, without continuously placing more and more pressure on the natural resource systems. And that means we have to really begin to put an emphasis on conservation, efficient use of resources, harnessing market forces to produce huge efficiency gains.
What do you foresee as Canada's role in the year 2035?
If we're clever, we should be able to use what we've got in abundance in a really major way, and that is still a fair bit of clean air, still a fair bit of natural resources, still a fair bit of gorgeous scenery. I suspect that we may well become one of the major tourist destinations in the world, particularly for Asian tourists who are wealthy and who will effectively pay us to begin to preserve a large chunk of our natural landscape. So I think we can use what we've always had to our considerable advantage if we preserve it more or less intact, so it's worth looking at.
We know now that Canada will not meet our promised reduction in greenhouse gases by the year 2000. What does this say to you about how feasible real change is?
My guess is that people get spurred to action to put pressure on their political leaders when they're convinced that a perhaps not a catastrophe, but a fairly major disaster is on the way. We probably need 3 or 4 extremely hot, dry summers in a row in North America, which will be followed by massive increases in grain prices, which will be followed by major pressure by the public on politicians to begin to take positive steps to do something about global warming. But I think we do need a series of events that will convince the public that this is a real issue and that it's not just a sort of wonderful thing for Canada because it won't be so cold in the winter and we won't have so much snow and we won't have so much freezing rain.
What's your biggest fear for the future?
Well, my biggest fear for the future is that we won't take action quickly enough. You know, these sorts of things are cumulative, and if you wait too long before you do something, you have to make really draconian changes. We get at things like energy conservation and efficiency and so on now, we'll find that we can make gradual changes which after 10 or 15 years' time will get us to the stage where we're in some kind of climate equilibrium. If we wait too long, the changes that are needed may just be too great to expect society to do it.
Are you optimistic?
I think there are grounds for hope. I think there are major changes which one can see happening technologically if we have the political will to make them happen quickly. So I think there are solutions, and I think we are capable of them. But it's going to take a real act of political leadership, both in Canada and worldwide, to do it. That's what bothers me. I'm not sure we can find that political leadership.
Mr. Reynolds, thank you very much.
Thank you, Bob.
So, science in the future holds both the promise of reaching the stars and the peril of a changing environment on Earth. The challenge is to use the incredibly powerful scientific tools we now have, combined with a little wisdom, to ensure our survival into the next millennium. Hannah?
Thanks, Bob. Stay with us. From science to spirit. Will faith guide us in the new millennium?
We have dealt with the last 50 years reasonably well, but if we're vigilant about our human relations, we'll do it tomorrow too. But let's not make science our God.
She's of average height and average weight. Yet there's absolutely nothing average about her. She's what happens when a company believes safety isn't one thing, it's everything. And she's the first and only crash test dummy with that special glow. The company is General Motors. Wishing you the safest of journeys this holiday season.
Long distance should be as simple as basic human communication. Now it is. Say hello to the kind of savings you've always wanted. Say hello to TELUS Your Way Long Distance. From now on, save 60% on calls from your home, all evening and all weekend. Hello? Save 25% during the day. Every minute, every day. Everything should be this simple. Call us today for TELUS Your Way Long Distance.
In case Santa didn't bring everything, shop at Walmart's Boxing Week blowout for all kinds of savings, like ladies' mini diamond or gemstone rings, just $49.96, and Oriental-style area rugs for just $42.96. And a special buy on assorted Super Nintendo and Genesis games. Your choice at just $14.96. Plus, your favorite Disney videos just $7.97. Hurry in for Walmart's Boxing Week blowout. Everyone will be there. Well, almost everyone. Happy holidays from Walmart.
Do you believe in magic?
Bring the winds of change to bear on all who need it near and far.
The spell is cast.
We don't even like each other, not really.
It's out of control.
Cleo's, pregnant.
And just how much change can one family stand?
Maybe we shouldn't do this anymore.
Sheila McCarthy, R.H. Thompson, The Lotus Eaters, a CBC television premiere, January 5th. Wednesday nights on CBC. It's all about who we are. Starting at 7, Wayne Rostad takes us on the road again. At 7:30, find out what makes us tick on The Health Show. At 8, share in the lives of extraordinary Canadians on Life and Times. Then at 9, a series about coming back home to Black Harbor. Wednesday nights on CBC, a uniquely Canadian evening of television to call our own. Starting January 8th.
Our National Maclean's poll showed that almost 75% of Canadians would find it acceptable if there was a revival of spiritualism in this country. But fewer than half think it likely. More telling, perhaps, even fewer younger Canadians think it will happen. I spoke with Rabbi Gunter Plaut about the changing nature of our faith as we approach the next millennium. There's a lot of stock-taking going on. As we're standing on the threshold of a new millennium, everybody is wondering where have we come from and where are we going? And there is a sense of insecurity, don't you think?
Well, the one is hype and the other one is real. The millennium business is nothing but hype. On the 31st of December, 99, we'll feel exactly the same as we'll feel on the 1st of January unless we're drunk. But the fearfulness, the insecurity that you talk about, that, alas, is real. Because people, I think, are more insecure than I have seen them in a very long time in my life. Yesterday, we all lived in the same place. Today, we live in all places. Your children are here, your grandchildren are someplace else, and we're going to populate the moon and Mars and whatever.
Yet, on the other hand, there are people who celebrate the potential, who talk about technology and what we're capable of doing, the fact that we can communicate with somebody on the other side of the globe.
Yes. But I have to remind you of two things. Number one, if you are the one that hasn't got the job, all that talk about the potential ain't very good. Number two, information and the increase of information and the hype about the internet, and I'm familiar with that, is not the same as knowledge and understanding. Building up more mountains of information, and you can browse until you're green in the face and your eyes are blurry. That doesn't really add to your understanding unless there is some knowledge and evaluation that goes along with it, and we haven't gotten there yet. It's all too new. We're still in a milestone, right in the center of the storm.
And what is it doing to human contact? You see yourself, you go to a bank and people are complaining there's no human being with whom they can speak. The organization for which I work, communication business, is now getting rid of switchboards so that the public can call and talk to a machine.
Just be patient, they'll get rid of you too.
I don't doubt it.
So that is a terrible problem. So people are insecure, so they're looking for some security. And part of that security they're finding in increasing numbers of spiritual. But they have to find security. They can't find it in economics. So they'll find it in supernatural. I think there is built into the human being a search for meaning, whatever that is. Now, in a time when things are even and calm, and when you have some idea of what tomorrow is going to bring, and how your grandchildren are going to grow up, and what they're going to be, I think there was faith was a kind of a routine. Today, it's a turmoil. You don't know anything about tomorrow. And so you're grabbing hold of something that will have meaning. And that search is built into us like a search for food.
Do you have faith in the future?
Well, I don't have very much future left, you know. I can't project too far into the future. Am I worried about my grandchildren? Yes, I am. Yes, I am. I can see how they're struggling with reality. And finding a full-time job that's meaningful. Yes, I'm a little worried. In fact, I'm a lot worried. But, as I say, the human race is going to be around for a little while longer unless we destroy ourselves sometime along the road. And we're going to adjust, and we're resilient. It's...
But do you think that the future that we're handing to our children's children will be gentler, will be kinder somehow than the world we know? Or is it just not in us, in human nature, to be kind and gentle?
Well, I'd like to think that actually it's in us, despite what some of the scientists will tell us. You know, nature, what was it, raw in tooth and claw. The basic structure of you and me is the cell, and the cell operates only by cooperation with other cells, unless you have cancer, God forbid. And that's the one time when the whole system breaks down. But you and I are alive only because of fabulous cooperation of that which makes us human. That's true for animals, that's true for plants. So I think cooperation is the basic structure.
Do you have faith in human nature?
Of course, I said the whole cellular structure is based on cooperation. We try to tear it apart. Yes, I have, of course. Its potential. Yes, but we have to recognize there's also a beastie inside.
And we have to be ever vigilant?
You bet. 200 years from now, they look back on the year 2000 or 1996. They say, boy, they sure lived in the Dark Ages. I haven't got the vaguest notion what we're going to do, how we're going to communicate, what kind of, you know, and we feel that if we can get 10 seconds faster, we've broken the sound barrier or whatever. I don't know what technology is going to do to us tomorrow. But I also believe that we're very elastic and we can adjust. And we have dealt with the last 50 years reasonably well. But if we're vigilant about our human relations, we'll do it tomorrow too. But let's not make science our God.
Thank you.
Monsanto's House of the Future is open to the public. A family food center to store atomically irradiated food. A look at the future. Looks good, eh?
The coming of a new millennium has created a new industry of futurologists, and they don't all agree. Tonight we have two guests with different views of what the future holds for us. With me in the studio is Carl Schrader, a sci-fi writer and president of the Canadian Science Fiction Authors Association, and in Vancouver, Frank Ogden. He's a longtime futurist and author of Future World. Is this whole preoccupation with the new millennium myth, or is there something to it? Is it?
Insofar as myths are self-fulfilling prophecies, then if we believe that the world is going to turn out a certain way, we're going to create it that way. I believe we're at a point now where we can do pretty well anything we want. And I think it's no longer a question of determining how technology is going to change our lives, but it's a question now of determining what we want our lives to be like and finding the technology, the appropriate technology, to live that life.
So it's really technology, Frank, that's going to change the world as we know it?
I see it as...
Definitely. And it's also not just the technology we have here in North America and the way we look at it, I've just come back from a 6-country tour of Southeast Asia, and I'm telling you, they're zooming ahead.
But in what areas, Frank? In what areas of technology? You see, what I don't understand, we keep extolling the virtues of technology, all this stuff we're going to do, and all the great things we will be able to accomplish. If that's the case, why is the planet in the shape it's in?
Well, we need to make political choices about the technology that we have. As I say, if we can do anything, then our choices are political. They're political, they're emotional. For instance, we now have the technology to go completely to electric cars. Why aren't we doing that hell-bent for leather right now? Because we have to make the decision, and we have to stick with it to get the economies of scale. We have to make political choices.
If technology is the future, who are going to be the elite, Frank?
Well, it's already happening. 40% of North America is going upscale and 40% is going downscale. But in Singapore and Japan now, they're making average per capita $52,000 per year in US dollars. What's happening in Southeast Asia, it's like the American Wild West on steroids. And they're moving into biotechnology, and they're upscaling every year their style of living and their per capita income. What's happening, everybody in Singapore that retires now, that's been working for 25 years, basically retires as a Canadian millionaire.
And the elite are what? It's those who know and those who don't know?
That's right. It's the know and the know-nots. It's not divided anymore by race or ethnic background or by where you are in the world. It's your level of knowledge.
That's true now. It may not always be true.
But what we're getting in is information. Is information knowledge?
Yes, and supposedly knowledge is power, but the current state of information technology is such that it takes a lot of effort and a lot of training to be able to use it. But in 30 years, computers will begin to fade into the walls. They'll begin to become ubiquitous. I expect that by the time I die, the word computer will be gone from the language, because they will simply have become so much an invisible part of our lives and so easy to use.
What, implanted in us?
Potentially, but so simple to use that an elite of people based on computer use will no longer exist.
In Japan already, there's computers you can wear. Some of them are in ladies' outfits that have a scarf and it has a built-in computer, very light, and it's not a desktop, but it certainly has the capability with the new 64-bit chips to be miniaturized and put in as an implant already. Do you know the 7 million cyborgs walking the streets of North America, and hardly anybody realizes it? There's 72 body parts so you can get off the shelf now. I myself have surgically implanted intraocular bionic lenses. And at 76, I can see further than most of the pilots flying the airliners because my vision's 20/17 in both eyes.
You guys are going too fast for me. Frank, you were talking about implanting ideas into the computer. So what is that going to make us? We're going to sit there and become the inanimate object, and the computer is going to have our feelings, our thoughts, our emotions?
It's possible we may be developing our own successors.
Who's the sci-fi writer here?
We may be creating another species. I don't believe personally in the information overload. I think it's a myth, but I do think the pressure of all this additional information is going to bump many into a higher level of consciousness, and they will become a new species.
You are already plugged into the new technology. You have had you've had surgery. Your eyes now are phenomenal. You have on your person all kinds of new technology?
Well, like the radio I use is this one here, size of a credit card, slightly thicker. And when I'm in an airplane, window seat required, flying across North America, it can pick up 5,000 radio stations. And of course, when you're scuba diving these days, you take along this new flashlight, so when you're down at depth where it's quite dark and you need to see a bit, here it is, and of course it's pressurized and the water doesn't leak in there. And these are just some. I have dozens. If you have a half-hour program, I'll bring a suitcase.
I think it's easy to be dazzled by technology. I tend to take the opposite view of where it's going to lead us, however. I think with industrial technology, machines, we are overwhelmed by them. But information technology works the opposite way. It frees us up. It allows us to step back. And I think we will need to communicate less with our machines in the future. We will become less alienated, if you will. We will exist less in the sort of non-real world of the TV and radio and the telephone. And we'll be more in touch with the real world.
Gentlemen, we're on shifting sand and everybody's very anxious and very nervous. Who are going to be the resilient ones? Who will get through this with less wear and tear? Males or females?
Oh, females, I think, because they adapt to change quicker than men. I think women are far better equipped for the communications age than men, who make their decisions based on their education and their experience, which even by definition is from the past. Women use their intuition.
I think the key point about information technology is that it adapts to us, and therefore it's not a case of one group having an advantage over another in the long run. We'll all adapt, or it will adapt to us.
I think to some degree we're looking into the unknown, into darkness, and that creates insecurity and fear.
But remember, at the present apparent chaotic condition is really the most creative environment. And I think that's what many will take advantage of in the decade to come.
But you used an interesting word. Is that what we're looking at now, chaos?
Well, to some people, certainly viewed every day as chaos. But after you've been at it a while, like myself, I see an elegant order underlying chaos. And that's the future.
Frank, Carl, I thank you both very much. See you in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That's it for me and for the magazine for this evening. I'll meet you back here tomorrow, but stay with us. When we come back, we'll have the National Almanac.
Coming up, our holiday almanac, Canada's City of Lights.
You can have money, you can have everything, but if you don't have magic, what is Christmas with no magic?
Lighting up the Christmas spirit in Montreal.
There's a car company which believes that a phone with a set of wheels has always been a terrific idea. That's why they created a customer communication center. So no matter what your automotive needs, all you have to do is call 1-800-GM-DRIVE. The company is General Motors, wishing you the safest of journeys this holiday season.
Ever suffer from the itch and pain of hemorrhoids? I have. So I use Preparation H. It shrinks the swelling of the hemorrhoids. And when you shrink the swelling, you relieve the itch and pain.
Preparation H shrinks hemorrhoids.
It's really that simple.
With Lauren, I learned from the doctor about Robitussin DM. Now I trust it to bring soothing relief of cough due to colds for the whole family.
Thanks, Doctor.
Robitussin DM, recommended by doctors, pharmacists, and Dr. Mom.
Fire! Now available on home video. Call now and have Air Farce's funniest video ever delivered right to your door. Order yours now by calling the number on your screen.
Hello, may I have a hamburger, some french fries, oh yes, and some McNuggets for Tiptoe.
Hi, everyone. Brought some McDonald's. Yoo-hoo, Daddy's home.
I'd also like a red bike and a coloring book instead of my brother. Not a hamster. Have you had your break today?
When we were looking for a place to live and raise a family, we had lifestyle qualities in mind.
Spending time together was very important to us, in surroundings where we felt at home.
A community with a friendly approach and a caring attitude.
We wanted to live in a town that had new styles with old-style values.
Not far from Edmonton, we discovered such a place. We discovered Devon.
Call 1-800-263-0307 and inquire about moving to Devon today.
Country in Halifax to sing seasonal songs and raise money for the food bank. The Huron Carol airs both at 6 and 11 p.m. Christmas Day on CBC, half an hour later in Newfoundland.
go to Montreal for tonight's holiday almanac, to some of the poorer parts of town. But as Mark Kelly found, what they may lack in luxuries, they sure make up for in Christmas spirit.
For some, Christmas hangs over this city like tinsel on a tree. Holiday shoppers rush from store to store, hands bursting with bundles and bags. But many hands are empty. They belong to the tens of thousands of Montrealers living below the poverty line. The hungry and the homeless line up at this shelter. A glowing nativity scene guides them to a hot meal and a warm bed.
They're going to give us a little supper. They're going to give us like a little present, like cigarettes, thing like this. But that's all we're going to have, you know. That's all we're going to get.
Montreal Mayor Pierre Bourque says his city needs a little added cheer. His solution? A Christmas lights contest. He's offering a trip to Paris, that other city of lights, for the best display in Montreal. And he's decked out City Hall just to show he's serious.
Critics think his contest is a joke, but it seems to be catching on. The city's East End is one of the poorest places in Canada. Now it's alive with lights. The Cyr family has dubbed their home Santa's Workshop. Sure, they want to win the contest, but if nothing else, Lorraine Cyr wants to make Christmas around here a little brighter. Cyr says people are down these days, and this may lift their spirits.
I mean, most of the people, they just put lights around the balcony.
Nancy Boileau is judging the contest. She says it won't put food on people's table, but it will put some joy into people's Christmas.
It's got nothing to do with solving the problems of a big city. It's got to do with Christmas. It's got to do with the spirit of Montreal.
Back at the Cyrs, they're putting the final touches on the tree. With all the competition this year, they may not make it to Paris, but at least they've got that Christmas magic. Mark Kelly, CBC News, Montreal.
And that's the National for this Tuesday night, Christmas Eve, 1996. I'm Paul Hunter. We'll see you again tomorrow.